is Naravan Dracovin, Lord and Emperor of the Dracovin Empire, and welcome! It is time to continue my discussion on the history of Magic the Gathering, going over set by set, product release by product release that Wizards of the Coast can come out with, showing off all the various cards, mechanics, history, and information you might want to know about, of course, the history of Magic the Gathering. So today for you, I have a core set. Magic the Gathering 2010 core set, or as it's also known as, Magic 2010, or M10. It was released on July 17th, 2009 with 249 cards. This was a change from Magic. It was a new type of core set being released. At this point in time, we see first off, name change. That's the big thing we're noticing here. We no longer are being called numerical 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th edition. No, we're being named after the upcoming year that this is. So this was released in 2009. It's being released for the season, which it's going to be the active core set for, up through 2010. So M10, hence the name there. This is switching over to a desire for the core sets to be a yearly release. Magic has already begun to settle onto the 4 sets a year format that they do have now. And the fact is, though, that because still at this time, blocks were 3 sets, they had a 4th slot in here that what would they fill with it? Things like Cold Snap, Unhinged, other types of sets that they were trying to fill in there weren't working as well. By making this a 4th core set, kind of filling in this middle ground, they could stabilize it. This also helped for their standard in rotating it out. At the beginning of the fall set release, beginning of a new block, we could begin a new cycle of standard. Very easily, we could cycle out the old standard and begin putting in together a new one. They were using this core set as a stopgap between them. This would be the first core set since beta that had new cards in it. That was one of the more interesting things about it. We're no longer looking just to reprint every card that we could, or have a selection of every card. We're now adding in new specifically made core set cards to this. In fact, a lot of the core set cards that were put in here, a chunk of them, the new ones, were put in there to be answers to the standard at the time. The problems that were in standard, we didn't have an answer to. Now we would be able to put an answer together for them, those problems, with cards from this set. We would fix the problems we were creating with the blocks in standard at the time. We also saw the inclusion of mythic rares for the first time in a core set, and planeswalkers, with a reprint of the planeswalkers from Lorwyn. We did see that they removed legends, which we had in the core sets in the previous one. For now, we don't have them. We also see that they've changed the set size, 249, to be equivalent to the large set as a 3-set block system. So now, it's got a standard amount of cards equivalent to what you'd have in the first set, the large set of a block. It makes it that it's, again, a little bit more standard, a little bit more concise. We can aim for what we want in design. We're not getting a lot of the bloating that core sets occurred with in previous times because of attempting to represent everything from Magic up until then. But you had to keep adding cards as they added more cards. Now, they also did remove the flavor text from Flying. Flying had some flavor text on it from a couple of the previous cores. Now it's kind of assumed that when you have Flying, folks know about Flying. It just becomes such a standard that reminder text on any of the core set cards, because this is, granted, this is going to be more of a beginner's set, core sets. You don't need it anymore. It's gone. Now, it was, of course, sold in our standard 16-card booster packs. We also had 6-card booster packs released from this one, 5 intro packs, and the Fat Pack. It is important to note there is no starter sets, no intro packs, no tournament packs, 2-player tournament packs, anything like that. None of those were printed along with this. It was treated much the same way as much of the other sets that we had been released now, though it's a core set, treated exactly the same way in a way. Now, the pre-release was on July 11th, 2009 and had Vampire Nocturnus, while the release card for the release party was Ant Queen. Both of these were new cards. They were put out to basically showcase a little bit about the new cards that were included within the core set now. Now, there is also another promo card we want to mention because they had the first buy a box promo. A buy a box promo was a promo card you would receive from certain stores if you bought a box of M10. You buy an entire box, they give you the promo card, that's it. Pretty simple like that. It was an incentive to buy an entire box. This was an alternate art promo, and in this case it was in honor of the Prior. Now, like the sets before now, we had a rules tip/token card as the 16th card. There were, in fact, 15 different rules cards that you could look at, including ones on a couple of card combos, but it also had 8 tokens, including a 1/1 green insect creature token, created by Ant Queen traditionally. And on the back of this was 13 possible advertisements that you could have, kind of a combination between these 23 cards and 13 advertisements for a lot of options for the 16th card. Now there was a lot of rules changes that actually occurred in the course of this set. This was the most amount of rule changes in a core set since 6th edition. And a lot of these, well, we'll go through them and explain a little bit more. First off, simultaneous mulligans. Now everyone would determine if they're going to take a mulligan or not, and those that determine it, take them together. A little simplified thing, not a big thing. The word for in play now changed to battlefield. It's in your battlefield. We changed terminology. You might notice that sometimes I still use the words in play. It's because that's what I grew up with. That's what I originally played Magic with. But battlefield is the proper terminology, and it was determined now. For those players that started in 2009, you know battlefield. We changed some other terminology. Now when you put a card out from your hand, basically playing a spell, it becomes casting a spell. I cast a spell from my hand. I'm paying its mana cost, casting it. Putting something into play is associated with lands, because I play the lands. Now creatures with activated abilities, I don't play their activated abilities, I activate them. These verb changes is helped to differentiate between these 3 different things, from casting a spell, playing a land, activating an ability. We also saw remove from game formally become exile. So now when you exile something, it is removing it from the game, but we're no longer using that terminology. We changed the term end of turn step, because that's what it kind of was to end step. A little simplification that now it's just your end step. It just helps clarify some of the English. Now here's a big one. Mana pools empty between steps and phases of your turn. This was a major one that they included because it did also get rid of another rule, mana burn. We no longer had mana burn after now because since we're emptying throughout the turn, it's so easy for people to give themselves mana burn. Otherwise, normally it's you get it at the beginning of the turn, at the end of the turn you burn yourself. The entire turn you have that mana in your mana pool. Now it empties. Over here. So you only can use it in between these steps. You have to plan out accordingly when you're going to use these. It changed the dynamic of the way that the mana pool worked. And getting rid of mana burn was a major thing too. There were cards and combos that were used to take advantage of mana burn to hurt your enemies. You can see that now we're basically forcing a lot of points and changing something dramatically. Granted, this is something that is old hat now, and most people accept that mana burn is a ancient thing that was better to get rid of. But at the time, people were confused. Token ownership. A clarification. If a token comes into play under someone's control, they're its owner. So if a token comes into play under my control, I'm its owner. Regardless if I created it using something I gave or something you did caused me to create this. I'm still the owner. You might have created it on my side. Whoever's side it came into play under, owner. Just a little bit of clarification there. Combat damage. No longer on the sack. So when you choose where to assign combat damage and the time it's dealt, there is no time. I'm dealing combat damage there, it's dealt. Bam, done. There is nothing there. Granted, I can still try to, play something after it, but there is no part of the stack for the, it's going there, it's dealing the damage there. It basically simplifies a lot of things that there was stuff that could have interrupted that point in time before when you chose where the damage is being dealt and it being dealt. It simplified things, removed confusion. Now, multiple blockers. When we have multiple blockers, I as the attacker get to choose an order the blockers are basically blocking this creature. So if there's my creature here being blocked by 2 creatures, I choose creature A and then creature B. My creature deals damage to creature A. If it exceeds enough that it would kill this creature, any excess damage goes over to creature B. Simple as that. I choose the order I'm damaging them then. Now, there's exceptions to this still, because we talk about Death Touch, which is becoming a static effect. It's when a creature deals damage, it kills the creature. So this point in time, it means that multiple instances of Death Touch no longer stack, because it's a static ability, and because then we would still be dying both from the Death Touch or possibly lethal damage at the same time. That would be at most the two things of death at the same time. Now, we do also have a clarification here when it comes to the multiple blockers. My Death Touch creature can choose to split its damage in between any number of the blocking creatures. Basically, I could Death Touch all of them. And the point about this is to make Death Touch still very deadly, and it's an exception to the change which we just mentioned under the blocking rules. Similarly, though, Lifelink has become a static effect, and the fact that multiple instances of it don't stack. You do damage, you gain that much life. Just became static. Last one, which is one that's really, it's a grandfather thing that people are talking about. It bans with others. It allowed for more banding creatures. But it's just something that's always been there. Its bans has existed, and the fact is that it still hasn't been completely eliminated, and they're still talking about it. It's just one of those weird things that we want to mention, because banding isn't printed anymore. It wasn't printed up until this point in time, but a little bit of rules clarification to simplify things helps even now. For if you're playing with a banding card, hey, you still can. It's perfectly fine in certain formats of Magic tournament play. We had rules clarification. Now, the fact is that these rules did, in fact, simplify the game. They made it easier. They got rid of some of the fluff and confusion, and there was a lot of backlash to it. There was a lot of people that disliked the rules changed. There was a fact that there was a good number of cards that these rules changed. Some of them they just depowered. Others they made completely useless. And some of these combos were popular that are made useless. Things that took advantage of things like mana burn. Now we're removing it. They'd always sort of moved towards removing some of these things. If you look at the flavors of the cards that they had up until now, they stopped taking advantage of certain these things that were in the older decks. And now with rules clarification, it doesn't hurt our current sets. It hurts that stuff long ago. And that's, I think, the problem is the legacy players at the point in time were complaining. Now, there were 5 cycles in this. There were the Color Hosers. These were uncommon cards that specifically targeted and damaged its enemy colors. The check lands were rare lands that when they came into play, if you had a basic land of one of 2 different types, it would be untapped rather than tapped. Otherwise, it came into play tapped, and it would tap for the 2 colors of mana that would match one of the 2 basic lands you would require. So if it tapped for a blue and a white, you'd have to either have a island or plains available for it to be untapped. The Lucky Charm artifacts were, of course, a reprint from previous. Cost 2 mana. When a spell of a certain color is played, you gain a life. The Planeswalkers were reprinted from Lorwyn. We found them to return now, though changed, of course, from rare to mythic rare. That's something we're going to mention again. There were also the Tribal Lords. These were 5 creatures that matched to a certain, tribe, a certain creature type. And it would give +1/+1 to that creature type and a certain ability, a static ability they would all gain. Now, there were 4 mirrored pairs in this set, including White Knight and Black Knight, the classic one from Unlimited. There was actually a parallel pair, too. Veteran Armorsmith and Veteran Weaponsmith in white, giving +1/+0 to creatures and +1/+0 to creatures, respectively. There were 20 functional reprints, including Elite Vanguard for Savannah Lions, making the lions into soldiers. There were 158 new cards in this set, including all that weren't in previous core sets. This included all, of course, the actual new cards and a number of reprints that hadn't been in the previous core sets being introduced total. There was a mix and match between them, because we still had reprints. Not all the cards were new, as we've already talked about. There were, of course, a number of changes in rarity, including all the Planeswalkers becoming mythic rares, and Righteousness, which had always been rare, changing to uncommon. These were just a few of the major changes. A number of the mythic rares that we had in the set that are reprints were in fact rares in their previous sets, just like the Planeswalker. Of course, we had 3 strictly better cards with Honor the Pure taking over for Crusade. It was basically Crusade with only your creatures. The exact same card, only your creatures. Vastly superior. There were also 5 strictly just worse cards. We saw Nature's Spiral being printed in this block as a replacement for Regrowth, and it's not as good. It's a cheap replacement in an effective way. They wanted to make regrowth not as powerful, Nature's Spire is their way of answering it with still the same effect. Now, there were 292 cards that had been in the last core set, removed now. There was a lot of cards that had been more standard within the core sets up until now that were just cut out, just for changes. Now, it, as I said, had 5 intro packs to it. We Are Legion is a white-red deck. Presence of Mind is a blue-black deck. Death Minions is a black-green deck. Firebomber is a blue-red deck. And Nature's Fury is a white-green deck. These were intro packs that actually showed off double colors. Up until now, intro packs were either supposed to be one color, or we had seen them be the 3 colors within the Alara block, because they were generally supposed to be representing the different shards, of course. Now we're seeing a representation of nothing in particular and 2 colors. Intro packs with core sets were traditionally more one color. That's why it's important to note that here. Traditionally one color, core sets, now 2. Now let's talk about some of the cards from this set. We had Acidic Slime, a 2/2 Death Touch that when it came into play, you destroy target artifact, enchantment, or land. Pretty good that you got rid of something, plus got a 2/2 Death Touch. Acidic Slime's one of my favorites. A Johnny Goldman, the Planeswalker reprint, came into play with 4 counters on him. For tick up of 1, you gain 2 life. Tick down of 1, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. And -6 to put a Avatar creature token into battlefield with power and toughness equal to your life total. Star life. There's a Luring Siren, which you could tap to have target creature and opponent controls attack you this turn if able. You could force an attack against you. Basically try to get rid of something that couldn't tap on its own that's weak, that you want to get rid of. Ant Queen is a 5/5 insect that for a colorless and a green, you can put a 1/1 green insect creature token in the battlefield. It creates a lot of ant tokens. If you have ways of creating a lot of mana, lots of ants. Armored Ascension. An enchanted creature gets +1/+1 for each planes you control, and has flying. If you have a lot of planes, it gets big and flying. Baneslayer Angel. A flying 5/5 first strike vigilance that has protection from demons and protection from dragons. So it's good at fighting both red and black. It has a little bit of fighting both of those with their standard big creatures being, of course, demons and dragons. Birds of Paradise is the standard from Unlimited that taps to add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. Cancel, of course, is counter target spell. It's the replacement for the original counter spell that's become a standard now. Captain of the Watch is a vigilance creature that other soldiers you control get +1/+1 and have vigilance. But also, when Captain of the Watch enters the battlefield, you put 3 1/1 white soldier creature tokens in the battlefield, which technically become 2/2 vigilances then, but they start out as 1/1s. Cemetery Reaper is a zombie that gives other zombies +1/+1, but for 2 colors and a black, you can exile a creature card from a graveyard, any graveyard, to put a 2/2 black zombie creature token in the battlefield. You get rid of cards from graveyards, anyone, and get zombies under your control, which, well, become 3/3s then. Chandra Nalar, of course, was the Planeswalker reprint. Tick up 1 does 1 damage to target player. Tick down X does X damage to target creature. And for -8 tokens on her, which she starts at 6, well, for tick down 8 does 10 damage to target player and each creature he or she controls. So you nuke someone and all their stuff for tick down 8. And you do start at 6. Coat of Arms is an artifact that, when it's in play, each creature you control gets +1/+1 for each other creature on the battlefield that shares a type with it. So whatever my creature's types are, I look to every other creature, and for each one that it shares a type with, +1/+1 on anybody's side, and this does affect everyone. Darksteel Colossus, of course, is a reprint. It's an 11/11 trample indestructible that if it's put in the graveyard from anywhere, you may reveal it and then shuffle it, and its owner may shuffle it back into its library. You would do that instead. Diabolic Tutor, you search your library for a card, put it in your hand, shuffle your library afterwards. Pretty simple. The Djinn of Wishes is flying and enters the battlefield with 3 wish counters on it. For 2 colorless and 2 blue, you can reveal the top card of your library while removing a wish token. You can play that card with no mana cost for free. If you don't, exile it. So I reveal the top card of my library, I play it without any mana cost. This is important because if it's a land, that means I can play it. Otherwise, exile it if I can't do anything with it. Elvish Archdruid gives other elves you control +1/+1, and also has tap. Add 1 green mana to your mana pool for each elf you control. So The more elves I have, the more mana Elvish Archdruid taps for. Elvish Piper is a classic reprint. 1 greed, tap it, put a creature card from your hand onto the battlefield. Fairly simple, I just get something from my hand to play for a green mana. Elvish Visionary is a staple because it's a 1/1 that when it comes into play, you draw a card. You play Elvish Visionary, you get a creature, you draw a replacement card. Still a big standard in a lot of green decks / elf decks. Of course, Fabricate, you search your library for an artifact card, you reveal it, put it in your hand. It is a standard in many artifact decks to have Fabricates to search for the artifacts that you need, of course. Fog, of course, is a classic one. Prevent all combat damage that be dealt this turn. Guruk Wildspeaker was yet another one of the Planeswalkers. Came in 3 with 3 tokens on it. For tick up 1, untap 2 lands. Tick down 1, put a 3/3 green beast creature token in the battlefield. And for tick down 4, creatures you control get +3/+3 and trample until the end of turn. Remember, Guruk is the overrun Planeswalker, and a very good one at that. Gorgon Flail isn't a piece of equipment. Equip cost of 2, and equip creature gets +1/+1, and Death Touch. This is an equipment that gives Death Touch. Haunting Echoes. Exile all cards from target player's graveyard, except for basic lands. Then, you search that opponent's library for cards that have the same name as any card that you exiled already with Haunting Echoes, and exile them. So for every card in their graveyard that you're exiling, you get all copies of them from their library and also exile them. Remember, this is not basic lands. This is everything else you can just completely destroy decks with by just cutting out all their copies of things and shrinking their decks into nothing. They shuffle their library afterwards. Hive Mind, an interesting one that hasn't been reprinted that has some very interesting tricks to it. Whenever a player plays an instant or sorcery, each other player copies that instant or sorcery. They may choose new targets for that copy. Meaning that if I play a spell, my opponent plays a spell. If we're playing multiplayer, I play an instant or sorcery, everyone plays that instant or sorcery. Chaos ensues. I had a friend who had a Hive Mind deck that wanted to put Scheherazade in it, which is play the sub-game of Magic. And everyone would have hated them. Always. He never did get it. But his Hive Mind deck was mean. Honor of the Pure. White creatures you control get +1/+1. You control. It's Crusade, but better. We said that earlier. Howl of the Night Pack. Put a 2/2 green wolf creature token in the battlefield for each forest you control. More forests, the more wolves you get. Hypnotic Spectre, the 2/2 flyer that, when it deals damage to an opponent, they discard a card at random. It's the classic of the Spectre types that deal damage to discard card, and one of the best because it's at random. Howling Mine, at the beginning of each player's draw step, if Howling Mine is untapped, they draw an extra card. Basically, as long as Howling Mine is untapped, people draw 2 cards. You can have it that if you have ways of tapping Howling Mine, you get the bonus, no one else does. Indestructibility gives target permanent, well, indestructible. It's any permanent. Jace Beleren is the blue Planeswalker reprint, had 3 counters on him. For tick up of 2, each player draws a card. Tick down of 1, target player draws a card. And tick down of 10, target player puts the top 20 cards of his or her library in his or her graveyard. Basically mills a whole bunch. Colonian Behemoth is a 9/9 Shroud. Big green creature. One that's interesting here. Of course, we had Levitation. Creatures you control have flying. Lightning Bolt does 3 damage target creature or player. The classic, still in print now. Lilana Vess was the black Planeswalker reprint. She started with 5 loyalty counters. For tick up of 1, target player discards a card. For tick down of 2, you search your library for a card, put it on the top of your library. So you set it up for you to be drawing the next turn. And for tick down of 8, put all creature cards in all graveyards into play under your control. You basically resurrect everything from every graveyard. Lurking Predators. When an opponent casts a creature spell, you may reveal the top card of your library. If it's a creature, you put it into play. Otherwise, you may put it at the bottom of your library. Basically, opponent plays creature spells, you can keep looking and getting creatures possibly to challenge them. I have some good decks with Lurking Predators. Master of the Wild Hunt. At the beginning of your upkeep, put a 2/2 green wolf creature token in the battlefield. Tap. Tap all untapped wolf creatures you control. Each wolf tap this way deals damage equal to its power to target creature. Then that creature deals damage equal to its power, divided amongst all the wolves you control as its controller does fit. So I tap all my wolves, deal damage to something, basically maul it to death, but it deals its damage back to my wolves as divided as my enemy sees fit. Megrim, whenever an opponent discards a card, Megrim deals 2 damage to them. Basically the answer to killing someone in a discard deck. Mesa Enchantress, whenever you play an enchantment, you may draw a card. Mindspring, draw X cards. X is how many you're paying for the mana. Naturalize, destroy target artifact or enchantment. A big one that's been printed a lot of times since then, but here it goes once again. Open the vaults. Return all artifacts and enchantments from every graveyard to the battlefield under their owner's control. You resurrect all enchantments, all artifacts under everyone. Overrun, creatures you control get +3/+3 and trample until end of turn. A big game winner. Palace Guards can block any number of creatures. Simple as that. It's a creature that just naturally can block everything. Platinum Angel, a 4/4 flyer that as long as Platinum Angel's in play, you can't lose the game and your opponents can't win the game. Prevents your loss, prevents their win. Polymorph, destroy target creature. That creature's controller reveals cards from the top of their library until they reveal a creature card and puts it into the battlefield. All the other cards revealed this way are shuffled in their owner's library. Basically, you kill something and replace it with something. It gets polymorphed into something else. Prized Unicorn. All creatures able to block Prized Unicorn do so. It's got lore on it. Basically, it makes everything have to block it. Protean Hydra is a Hydra that enters the battlefield with X+1/+1 counters on it. It's a Hydra. Whenever it be dealt damage, however much damage it's dealt, you remove that many +1/+1 counters. So as it takes damage, it shrinks. But for every +1/+1 counter that is removed from Protean Hydra, at the beginning of the next end step, you put 2 +1/+1 counters back on it. So if you fail to kill Protean Hydra in one turn, it returns with, well, double its strength nearly, or double whatever strength you were attempting to remove from it. Relentless Rats. It gets +1/+1 for each other creature named Relentless Rats that are in play. Caveat here, and a very interesting one, you may have any number of Relentless Rats in your deck. You could have a pure Relentless Rats deck and just keep playing Relentless Rats and make them bigger, 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 bigger. It's actually an option for a deck type. Might not be very good, but you could do it. Royal Assassin. Tap. Destroy target tap creature. Reprint from the limited and unlimited classic. Safe Patches. Prevent all damage that be dealt to you and creature you control until end of turn. And this is all damage. Combat damage, non-combat damage. It prevents it all to you and your creatures. Safe Passage is a standard in white for protecting yourself. Sanguine Bond. Whenever you would gain life, target opponent loses that much life. So I gain life, my opponent loses life. It's part of another combination, but Sanguine Bond was still good in general in a black-white life gain deck. You gain a whole bunch of life and just cause your opponents to keep on losing it. Or if you just played black and used a lot of those things that you siphon life from an opponent, it siphons double damage. So you siphon life, you gain life, they lose life again. Ouch. Siege Gang Commander. When it enters the battlefield, you get 3 1/1 red goblin creature tokens, and for a colorless and a red, you can sacrifice a goblin to do 2 damage to target creature or player. You blow up goblins to kill things. Silence. Opponents can't cast spells this turn. It basically shuts down an opponent when you play it. Sleep. Tap all creatures target opponent controls. They don't untap during that controller's next untap step. So you tap everything an opponent controls, leaving them open to a lot of attacks and other things, and, well, they don't untap on their next turn, so you get 2 opportunities to murder them. Soul Warden. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield, you gain 1 life. It's the classic, I put more creatures come on the battlefield, the more life I gain. Soul Warden. Once again printed. Telepathy. Target opponent plays with their hand revealed. Just a mean one in general. Time Warp. Target player takes an extra turn after this turn. Normally you Time Warp yourself to give yourself an extra turn after this one. It changed from rare to mythic here, but it came back. Time Warp. Traumatized. Target player puts the top half of their library rounded down into their graveyard. Split in half, go to graveyard. This is a good combination for a blue-black of Traumatize, Haunting Echoes. Oh, you don't have a deck anymore. Weep. 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 Twincast. Copy target instant or sorcery. You may choose new copies for that instant or sorcery. Underworld Dreams. Whenever an opponent would draw a card, Underworld Dreams does 1 damage to them. The more cards your opponents can draw, the more damage they take. Combined with things like Howling Minds, Font of Mythoses, you can have your opponents drawing a lot of cards and dying very quickly. Vampire Nocturnus. You play with the top card of your library revealed. If the top card of your library is a black card, all your Vampire Nocturnus and all your other vampires get +2/+1 and flying. So if they didn't have flying, now they fly, they all get bigger. Great for a vampire deck if you really want to play one. Warped World. Each player shuffles all permanents he or she controls into their library. Then they reveal that many cards from the top of their library. They take all artifacts, creatures, and lands revealed this way and put them onto their battlefield. Then they do the same for enchantments. If there were any cards that were revealed that weren't put into play, those go to the bottom of your library. So planeswalkers, instants, sorceries, all those kind of things, bottom of your library. But enchantments, artifacts, creatures, and lands, they're all out in play. If I was playing a big token deck and my opponent was not, I could have pretty much most of my deck out in play. Whisper Silk Cloak. Equip 2. Equipped creature cannot be blocked and has Shroud. Classic unblockable equipment. And finally, Xanthrid Demon. At the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice a creature other than Xanthrid Demon. Then each opponent loses life equal to the sacrificed creature's power. If you cannot sacrifice a creature, Xanthrid Demon becomes tapped and you lose 7 life. So you do want to feed stuff to Xanthrid Demon, but it murders everybody too. If you don't, you get hurt by it. But that's it for today. So I'll introduce you to M10, or Magic the Gathering Core Set 2010. Magic 2010. This is the new version of a core set that came into play after, well, we had all the previous core sets. This was a new evolution of core sets. We saw major changes in the rules of the way Magic works, introduction of new cards and core sets that hadn't been in play before, had never existed, something not happened since beta. Changes in the way that core sets were looked upon and how they were used to manage Magic the Gathering that will last for a good number of years to come. This would be the standard for quite a while, the way that things were looked at. And though it has changed since then, up until now, or from now for a while that we're going to be talking about, this is an important one. This was an important change in evolution to know about Magic. It was a step away from some of the still artifacts of the past, like Mana Burn, which really sucked. That's the easy way of saying it. It was terrible. And we're taking a step away from this terribleness of the past and walking towards a future which is a lot brighter, as we can see for Magic. But anyway, I hope you're having a great day. If you had some fun times with M10, it has interesting decks or some interesting use of some of the cards from it, let me know in the comments below. But regardless, until the next time, I bid you farewell.